Hey, Ellie. Hey, Quentin. Hey, Venzi. Darlene, Jackie, Anuradha.
All right. Darlene, Nancy. Yeah, we're gonna wait a couple of minutes more, then we're gonna start.
Yeah, I think maybe wait just a little beyond start time as well, just to give people, because I think people also are getting used to the platform. So
yeah. I think it's called hop in for a reason, Tara. Don't feel bad.
yeah.
Hop in anytime you want, anywhere you want.
Yeah, hopefully more in and stay than out. Hey, Daniel. Hey, Art. Hello, Niti. Craig. Hey, Jessica. Welcome. Hey, Scott.
All right. Give it 1 more minute.
That's just my phone. Quite a bit.
Well, the music style matches the quality, though.
Wish I could into this and then the experience.
All right, we got 20 people here. Shall we kick it off?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, so welcome everybody to Superlearning for High Achievers. So in this 1 hour webinar, we're basically going to give a short overview of the principles behind Superlearning. So that's like, first of all, the mindset, then the habits, and then actual practical techniques that we can use to learn more effectively and learn faster. So basically, it's all about learning how to learn. And it's a short introduction into the course that Ryan and I are preparing about the same subject. So yeah, as I said, I'm presenting this together with Chata. My name is Dominic Zilstra, and I am from Holland. I studied engineering physics, did a master's. After that, I worked in several fields. I worked in higher education, in aerospace as an electronics engineer, then in fintech, as a data scientist, as a software engineer, as a data engineer. So I learned a lot of different kinds of engineering, and I also have lived all over the place. So I lived in 8 different countries, and I picked up a bunch of languages, as you can see, so German, Portuguese, French, and then at some point, I started learning Chinese because my girlfriend is Chinese, and that's when I really hit my learning roadblock, my struggle. And yeah, I explored several courses that were out there. But yeah, they were all trying to teach me Chinese, but they didn't teach me how to learn Chinese. So at that point, I had to take a step back and reflect on my learning process. And eventually, I came up with a learning process that worked for me, and which I could successfully use to learn Chinese, and which then I could also apply to other areas. So I used that to learn data science, as I mentioned, and a couple of programming languages as well. And then I decided to turn that learning method, a super learning method, into an app, which I've launched. So I'm an EdTech founder now, and into this course, which I'm now building together with Ryan. And now, Ryan, tell us about your super learning journey.
Awesome. Thank you, Dom. Dom, just one thing. The slides aren't changing for me. Are they changing for everyone else? Can you just type into the chat to see if you've seen the slides change?
Okay, Andrew can see the slides.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. So I can't actually see the slides change. So I'm not sure what we're going to do here. But
can you check your connection, maybe? Like, does it help if you change to hotspot or something like that?
I am on hotspot.
Okay.
Okay.
You have the presentation. Open the presentation locally on your computer. Yeah, like Full Jimmy is saying.
Yeah, I think I'll have to do that. Just give me 1 sec. Sorry, everyone. Just give me 1 minute.
Araminder, thank you for being supportive. Danielle.
All right. So, let's see. All right. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah. You don't need to share it. Just keep it for your own reference.
Okay. Okay. Fine. I'll.
Yeah.
Right. Stop that.
Yeah, we have to become as super learners about this platform as well. Clearly, we should have learned that quicker.
All right. So, okay. Hopefully, it's on my slide now. So, people, I'm Ryan, and I'm from India, and I have studied finance at the undergraduate and postgraduate level. And one of the first times in my life that I actually, or first times in my professional life that I had to actually use super learning techniques was when I was doing my CFA exams, which are a bunch of professional exams that you do when you want to work in investment or trading. And after that, I've worked in advisory. I've done a bit of trading. I have started an online school for cryptocurrency and blockchain education. And I currently run a couple of schools here in Bangalore, in India. And that last point there is probably the most interesting, or at least the one that I like to gloat a lot about, which is that I have actually played a little bit of professional cricket. I played for the UAE in a number of tournaments, and I've also played semi-professionally in the UK. And that's actually where my super learning journey began, which was because I was playing so much cricket, I actually had very little time to spend on academic work and to study. So I actually had to develop a system for myself where I was able to do a lot with a very limited amount of time. And that's essentially where I started looking up techniques and trying to see how I could get more efficient at learning and get the most bang for my buck, as it were, in terms of the time spent. So that's a little bit about me. And so, Dom, can we go to the next slide?
Yeah, next slide is up.
All right. So what you see here is essentially just an image. It's actually a GIF image, and it's just got these lilac/light purple dots on it. And Dom's going to press play now. And I just want you to focus on the image. So focus on the dots first. And then now I want you to shift your focus to that black plus sign in the middle and keep your focus there. Make sure you're blinking. Don't stop blinking, but just focus on that black plus sign. All right. So you should have noticed something. So can you type into the chat what you noticed?
Yeah, so people are typing already. Yeah, Tamana is saying the lila is disappearing.
Okay, one green circle moving.
A green circle,
Okay.
a green bottle.
Daniel's going blind. Okay.
We are sorry about that, Daniel.
All right. So actually, what was happening was that the actual GIF image only has these purple circles, and they keep disappearing one at a time. And the image actually doesn't have any green circles in it, right? Is that your brain is receiving this visual input, and then it's applying this filter, which at most times is we're not even aware of these filters. And that's something that the brain does, and we're not conscious of it, and it does it all the time. And as we move on to the next slide,
yeah,
I will explain in a little while what's happening and why that happens. Right, so same with this slide. What I just want you to focus in on the white space. So pick a white space on the image and just focus in on it. And we do that for a few seconds. Just make sure you're blinking, right? Don't stop blinking, because a lot of our perceptions, at least our visual perceptions, are tied to blinking. All right, now I want you to zoom out and just look at the entire image. So zoom out and just take in the entire image. All right. And so again, you can type into the chat, what did you see?
All right, Divesh is having problems focusing.
Yep.
Quentin was black spots in the white intersections. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Black squares, gray areas.
All right. Perfect. So some of you saw these black spots in the white intersections. And again, Dom, if we go back to the image, you'll see that there's actually nothing. There's actually no black dots. They just seem to be appearing and disappearing. And again, it's essentially your brain doing this little trick where it's applying a filter to the visual stimulus that's coming in, right? And this is something that's happening beyond our control. We can't actually control it. The only thing that we can do is to become aware of it. All right, let's move on to the next slide.
Yep.
All right, so here you see sort of something that looks like a train track. And again, I just want you to sort of focus on the image, focus on what you see. Notice everything that's there in the image. Right. So I want you to type in the answer to that question into the chat.
Upper one is longer, says Quentin. Art says the upper one. Others
Okay.
the same. Some people think the upper one.
All right. All right. So all of you have clearly caught on, right? It's actually not a trick question. It's just I'm just trying to demonstrate what the brain does again. So if we go back to the slide, Dom,
yeah.
Those of you who said they were the same, you were right. Okay. And again, what's happening is because of the intersecting black lines, there is a slight difference in perception that's created, and the yellow lines are actually the same size. All right. So what's actually happening is when we perceive whatever we're exposed to in the real world, we're not actually looking at the truth, right? What we are actually looking at, or what we're actually getting into our senses, and then in terms of what we're perceiving, has a filter, right? And that filter essentially is our perceptions, our assumptions, our past experiences that is getting layered on top of the stimulus, right? And if we can move on to the slide, Dom, which has the white dot in it, that's essentially the white dot is actually what we actually end up perceiving as reality, right? So actual reality, objective reality, is very different to what we perceive as reality. right? And this is something that we need to be aware of, not only in our daily life, but also when we're actually being intentional about learning, because this is something that comes into play in many, many ways. And if we're not sort of paying attention to this, we can be led down rabbit holes that we don't really want to go down to. All right, so if we are on the slide which says information is meaningless, right? And that's sort of the point of all of these illusions that I showed you, because these visuals in themselves didn't really have anything in them. They were just visuals, right? But then what we actually perceived after our brains actually layered them with this filter of past experiences and assumptions was something that was completely different to what the visual actually is, right? If we go back to that lilac circle GIF image, all of you saw a green dot. And I can guarantee you, I can send this image to you after this talk. There are no green dots on that image, right? So information in itself is meaningless, which means that everything that we do in terms of actually what our brain does is to layer this information with meaning, right? So our brain can be thought of as just this really smart, really quick machine of learning, right? And of making meaning out of data points that in and of themselves are quite meaningless. So what's the point I was trying to get at? The point I was trying to get at is that we all have our delusions. And that's one way to look at it. And what we actually want to become is intentional about our delusions. So we go in with this awareness that our brain is this meaning-making machine, and it's always layering meaning on top of what we bring into our world through our senses. And we have to be intentional about these, because that's the only way we can become really good learners. And with that, I'll pass it over to Dom.
Yeah, so as Ryan said, we have to become intentional about our delusions. And when we do that, we can actually trick our brain in such a way that we can take advantage of those delusions. And that's one of the keys to super learning. And I'm going to do together with you an exercise. And I'm going to warn you, it's going to be a bit weird, so be prepared. The exercise is called a memory palace. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to learn one skill together, and we're going to learn it in a completely different way than you would usually learn those kind of things. So first of all, we have to choose something that we want to learn. And I've already made this choice for you. We're going to learn a very useful skill, which is called copywriting. Copywriting is basically writing blogs, writing a website, writing on Twitter in order to persuade people to take some action. So this is just an example that I've decided we're going to learn about this, and we're going to learn about it in a super learning way. So if you have a look, how can I become better at copywriting, you will soon find all kinds of principles that you should remember. For example, starting with a hook, great first sentence. We have to arouse curiosity, trigger emotions, make it a personal and relatable story, be specific with numbers, use simple sentences, one sentence per idea, and with a cliffhanger, call to action. Well, basically, after reading all of this, I think information overload. Right. Sorry, that slide doesn't work very well. It's too much information, right? We cannot possibly remember all of this. And basically, the next time we sit down and we have to write something, we're basically going to fall back to our instincts and not going to use any of those principles. And that's a shame, because we can really get much better at this skill and learn it much quicker if we could internalize those principles. So we're going to try to learn these principles in a different way. We're going to do that by visualizing them. We're going to pack them into a story, and we're going to visualize that story, and then all the elements in that story will help us remember one of those copywriting principles. So I want you to, I'm going to describe a story for you, and I want you to visualize this story in your mind as I tell you about it, and really try to picture this in your mind. So we're going to start with Captain Hook. You might know him. He's the Disney captain with a hook for a hand. And Captain Hook is reading a book. The book is a diary, actually. It's a diary, and it's written by the 13-year-old Ernest Hemingway, the famous writer. And as he goes through this diary, he reads a headline. It says the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And he's curious about this. Like, his curiosity is triggered, and he decides to read on. And there's just one sentence there, and this sentence is saying 42. At this point, of course, he's a bit outraged, a bit of disbelief, a bit disappointed, maybe even. And then there's one more line that says, "Always bring your towel." And that's the story. It's a weird story, right? I told you it's gonna be weird. And yeah, I want you to visualize this story in your head. And now I'm going to explain to you how that can help us remember the principles of copywriting. So each of the elements in this story has a meaning which is related to one of the principles of copywriting. So we have Captain Hook, which tells us that when we write copy, we should start with a great hook. We mentioned that Captain Hook was the first sentence, and he decided to move on, and his curiosity was triggered. Then when he read it, he actually felt outraged. He had an emotional response. And what he was actually reading, as I mentioned, it was a diary. A diary is a very relatable, and it has stories. So all of those are principles as well. And then the answer he was reading was 42. 42 is a number. Using numbers and being specific is another principle of copywriting. And the diary was written by the 13-year-old Ernest Hemingway. So that tells us we should use simple sentences that a 13-year-old can understand. One sentence is one idea. And then finally, he read "Always bring a call to action." So basically, all the elements in the visual story map to one of the principles of copywriting. And if you are able to visualize this image, and if you have done it with me, in 1 week, in 2 weeks, even in a month, you will be able to remember this visual story. And all you have to do at that point is run through this story and see how each of the elements in this story map to the principles of copywriting, and you will be able to write better. And this works much better than if you just write down this list of principles that we saw before, because you know how it is, right? You take a note, you write this down, and you never look at it again. And basically, you're not going to be able to put that into practice. So why did that work? Why is this method so effective? There are several reasons for that. First of all, we made it very visual. We used our visual cortex. The visual cortex is the most powerful part of our brain, and it can basically hold unlimited amounts of information. And maybe to demonstrate that, write into the chat, think about your childhood bedroom and write like a few details that you remember about it, like what colors were there, what toys, what furniture, what did it look like? Like, are you able to remember those visual details? Yes. So people are able to remember that, right? Right. Yeah. Even if you don't want to write it into the chat, yeah, people are saying, yeah, amazing how much I can recall, and yeah, this really shows the power of the visual memory. I mean, it's like 10, 20, maybe 30 years ago that you were there, right? But you still remember all of those details, and that really shows how powerful the visual memory is compared to our very, very limited memory for concepts and words. So our short-term memory can only hold 5 to 7 items at a time, and it actually takes a lot of energy to keep those items there. So if you can turn this into something visual, you can imagine how much more easily we can remember that. But that's not the only reason that it worked. The other reason is we were telling a story, even though it was not a great story, right? It was a weird story, but nevertheless, it's a story, and people recognize patterns, and people love stories. And in fact, storytelling is the way that education worked for most of the history of humanity. So when we were living in tribes, people were telling their children stories so they could learn about the environment, about the animals, but also about the values of the tribe. So stories are a very important device for teaching, but also you can create your own stories to learn much more effectively. So maybe think of a story that you really like and write into the chat what did it teach you? Because most stories are not just stories. They actually have a meaning and they can teach us something and we can learn from them. So just type something you learned from a story that you like. Brian, yeah, Brian liked the Oliver Twist story and he learned to ask for more. So, Three Musketeers, right? Yeah, so all of those are great stories and they do teach us something and they teach us something memorable and we will remember it forever. And then the third reason that this technique actually worked is because I didn't just randomly choose things to put into my story. I choose things that were familiar to me so that I already knew. So I already know Captain Hook, right? I've seen the comics. I already knew Ernest Hemingway. I've read some of his books. I made a reference to The Hitchhiker's Guide of the Galaxy, which is a book I like, which has like the number 42 and the meaning to life, the universe, and everything. So I built my story on top of things I was already familiar with, and this is something we should always try to do, and which will massively help us remember stuff. If we learn something new, we have to connect it to the old, to the familiar, and build it on top of that, and that will, that will help you remember tremendously. So maybe just to prove that this works, as I said before, short-term memory can only hold 5 to 7 items at a time. So just write down one thing you remember from the story, and I think you will find out that you remember much more than 5 to 7 items from the story. So that shows that even in this couple of minutes that it took you to learn this technique, your memory has already been improved. So what do you remember from the story? Just write down one thing. Ryan was a hero. Ryan remembered everything. I mean, you probably all remember Captain Hook, right? You remember...
That's correct, Terry. That's the aim. Good job.
That's the aim, yeah. All right. So those are just three principles that can help us to learn more effectively, and in this case, mainly to memorize more effectively. And memorization is just one of the parts of learning how to learn, which is basically what this is all about. And to learn any new skill or topic, there's basically 3 steps, and each of those steps can be improved, can be done faster, can be done more effectively with the techniques we teach you in this course. And the first step when learning something new is building understanding. So understanding is basically making those connections that I mentioned before between the new stuff and the familiar, the old stuff that we already know. So we try to identify the basic building blocks of any new skill or topic, and that's like the trunk of the tree, like this tree of knowledge, as Elon Musk popularized it. That's basically the thing we want to build in our brain in order to build understanding. So we identify the root of the tree, then we identify what it branches out into, and then maybe there's something we go down all the way to that rabbit hole, into the little twigs. It branches out a lot of times, and that's the kind of structure we create. And if we are conscious about that, this is the way that knowledge works, we can build that understanding much quicker. Then the next step, as I already mentioned before, is memorization. So So a major problem is, of course, forgetting, right? I mean, forgetting is a blessing, but it's also a curse when we want to remember something. And the way that forgetting actually works was researched about 100 years ago by a German scientist called Ebbinghaus, and he discovered that we forget exponentially. So just to explain it, he discovered this forgetting curve, which basically means on day 0, you learn something and you remember it 100%. But then the next day, it's dropped to around 50%. A day later, it drops to around 35%, and so on until like after 7, 8, 9 days, you're very unlikely to recall what you just learned. So how can we improve this? What can we do about this? And this is something where technology can actually help us. So the way it can help is by setting reminders. So instead of learning something and then slowly forgetting it, we learn something on day 0, but then the next day we are reminded of it. Maybe we get an email, and then a couple of days later we are reminded again, maybe with a text message, and then even later we have a conversation with a person about this topic, and we remember everything perfectly again. So at every reminder, this forgetting curve is reset to 100%. And not only that, as you can see, at every reminder, the rate of decay actually becomes slower. So the curve becomes more gentle, which means that it takes longer for us to forget again. And in fact, science has shown if we space out those reminders most optimally, with 7 or 8 reminders, this curve becomes so gentle that we can basically remember something for life. But the key to that is to have an algorithm which spaces out those reminders in such a way that the first reminder comes quickly, the second one takes a bit longer, then the third one even longer, and so on and so on. And this kind of algorithms is called spaced repetition, and it's one of the algorithms that the app which I developed called Traverse uses and helps you learn more effectively. And with that, we come to the last step, which is application. So the goal of learning any new skill is applying it in real life, right? That's where we get the real value. And there are a couple of techniques here as well, which can help us get better and more effective at application of new knowledge. One of them is deliberate practice. So that basically means you find a way to practice the skill or the topic you want to learn in such a way that there's no risk of failing. And again, I'm going to take an example here about learning how to write, which is the SHIP 3430, which is a course run on the internet, and which basically asks people to write something every day for 30 days. So it basically gets them into this habit of writing, and they deliberately practice their writing skills. But that's not the only thing. Then they actually have to go out and publish what they write on Twitter or other social media. And what that does is they get feedback, right? I mean, they can see from the reactions on their story, is this good? Maybe it was very bad. And then they can actually start to measure their progress. And hopefully the thing they wrote on day 30 was much better and got much better response than the thing that they wrote on day 0. So yeah, deliberate practice and creating those feedback loops are some of the techniques we can use to improve how we apply knowledge in real life. And the key to actually doing that is creating a learning habit, which Ryan is going to tell us a bit more about.
All right, thanks, Tom. So all of these amazing techniques that Tom has just told you about are really cool, really interesting, but they're not going to be effective unless you can build a learning habit. And what I want to talk about now is about building habits. So I want you to put into the chat now one habit that you're proud of, and preferably something that's not the mundane, so not like brushing your teeth and having a bath, but one habit that you've built over the last few years that you're really proud of. So why don't you put that into the chat? Meditation. Yeah, I like that. journaling, budgeting, all right, meditation again, noticing every small detail, interesting. Carving out some me time during the day, reading, running, exercise. All right, awesome. So those are all habits that we've built up, and the fact that you've been able to do them consistently means that they have become a part of your life and they're a part of your routine now, right? Um, so, so James Clear in his book Atomic Habits describes a habit as a behavior that has been repeated enough times to make it automatic, right? So the key here in this definition is about repetition so that it becomes a habit. And repetition, when most people think about habits, they think in terms of time. So they say things like, you would have heard it takes 21 days to build a habit. It takes 66 days to build a habit. Well, actually, it's not so much about the passing of time. It's about the number of times that you repeat a particular behavior. So one of the things that we're trying to focus on in our course is to build a learning habit. So how does one build a habit? So I want to talk you through a 4-step process that James talks about in his book, and it's one that I have used in the past. So I always sort of tend to forget to eat fruit. So what we're going to do is work through this example of how I built a habit of eating fruit regularly. So the first thing that you do is to make it obvious, right? And how did I make eating fruit obvious? So the thing that I used to do is when I'd come back to my desk in the morning to sit down to work, I'd bring a couple of pieces of fruit with me and keep them on my desk, right? So there was no way that I was going to miss out on noticing that I had fruit on my desk. So that was like a constant reminder that I had to eat fruit. The second step is to make it attractive, right? And how did I make eating fruit attractive? Apart from the fact that I was choosing fruit that I actually like to eat, the way I structured it was when I'd pick up my piece of fruit to eat was when I'd actually take a break. And during this break, I do things like check social media, maybe read an article, watch a video on YouTube, respond to WhatsApp messages, stuff like that, right? Just stuff where I'm chilling out and just taking a break. So that's what made the habit actually attractive. And this is something called temptation bundling, where you actually attach something to something you do, in this case, eat fruit, to something that I wanted to do, in this case, watching a YouTube video, just chilling out, reading an article on the internet, right? So that's step 2, to make it attractive. So you look forward to it. And the third step is to make it easy. Now, this again comes back to me keeping my fruit on my desk, right? It was literally just an arm's length distance away from me, and I could just pick it up and peel it and eat it, right? Couldn't get easier than that. Contrast this with some time earlier in my life where I had failed to do this, where I would actually have to get up from my desk, get up from where I'm sitting now, walk out of my room, go into the kitchen, pick up fruit, wash it, peel it, etc., and then eat it. If I had to do all that work just in order to develop a fruit eating habit, there's no way I would be able to do it. So making it easy for myself, which is keeping it right here, was the best way for me to make that behavior repetitive. And the last is to make it satisfying. So satisfying is more to do with the rewards from actually executing on your habits. And in this case, that does sound like 2 habits. Yeah, that's essentially habit stacking theory. That's called habit stacking. And how I made it satisfying, well aligned with my goal of wanting to be healthy, to wanting to have a low body fat percentage. And earlier when I wasn't eating fruit, I was snacking on things like biscuits, cookies, crisps, stuff that wasn't going to get my body fat very low. So in aligning it with another goal of mine, which was to be as healthy as possible, I made it satisfying for myself. So the point I was trying to make was that effective learning is highly, highly dependent on effective learning habits, and we have to build habits, because the sooner that we can build a learning habit, the sooner we can do it consistently, and the longer that we actually execute on a learning habit, the greater our returns from learning. So this graph that you see in front of you, as you can see, the further out in time that you go, assuming that you have been executing on a habit and doing it consistently enough, your results from learning will continue to get exponential.
Right. And we want to help you kick off your exponential learning journey and get exponentially better at learning over time. And that's why we have prepared a little gift for you, which is basically a mini course on Superlearning. So you will learn about all of the principles and steps that we talked about in this short webinar, but also much more that you will also get in our course into much more detail. And there's also a habit tracker in this. It's a Notion template, which will actually help you build a learning habit. And you can scan this QR code, like some of the more curious of you might have seen this before in the presentation as well. Or just go to the link. I think Ryan dropped it into the chat as well. And that's,
yeah, I've put it in the chat.
Yeah. All right. So back to you, Ryan.
All right, cool. So just one slide. This is the last slide, and it's just a reminder that all of goals, we're trying to achieve a lot, we're trying to do a lot with our lives, but one thing to remember is that no matter what we're trying to achieve, we're always going to fall to the level of our systems, right? So the sooner you put in place a solid process and a solid system in a habit, the quicker that we'll become super learners and achieve everything that we want to achieve. So that's pretty much what we had for today. Thanks so much for listening to us and for being here with us. And I think we can open up the Q&A now. And I think it would be really cool if some of you actually came up onto the stage with us. See a button to join the stage. So if you do have a question, either type it into the chat, join us on stage. I think that'll be the best.
Yeah, or just drop your question in the chat, because we're not sure if this on-stage thing actually works. But yeah, if people want to try it, please. So I think Eric and Freeman are currently in the moderation panel. Okay, Eric, do you want to come on stage? Let's add him on stage, see what happens.
Yeah, we've never actually done this before, so we don't know what's going to happen.
Veer is in the moderation panel now. Is she able to come on stage?
All right,
yeah,
Veer's coming on. All right, Veer's
Veer, nice to meet you. You have to unmute yourself, I think.
All right, am I audible now?
Yeah, great.
It's really nice to meet you. The workshop was awesome. Thanks a lot. So one question I had was that if you're trying, like, is there any maximum limit on things that we can learn at a particular time? Like, if you're trying to reach into the depth of something, what is the best hack for that to actually not just increase width, but actually go into the depth of something?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if there is a hard limit, but one technique that you can use, which has been shown to learn more effectively, is actually interleaving, which means you study different subjects at one time. So for example, those should be maybe 3, maximum 4 subjects, and then you study a little bit of that, a little bit of the next one, then a little bit of the next one, and that basically helps you form connections between the different subjects that you're studying, and that actually helps you form deeper understanding. So that's certainly, even if you want to go into depth, it's still good to learn a little bit of something different as well at the same time. So that's one thing I can tell you. I don't know, Ryan, if you have any additional thoughts.
Yeah, so interleaving is a great technique, and also it also ties into, we're all trying to form a rounded view of the world. And when you do interleaving, you're trying to pick 2 or 3 subjects that you're trying to go into, and that helps you to see the connections between these different chunks of knowledge. And the more that you can connect these disparate fields of knowledge and see how they're connected, the more powerful your learning will be and the deeper your understanding will be. So you wouldn't want to go into too many subjects at the same time. You'd want to try and stick to subjects that you can connect in some way. So for example, physics and math, can be connected very easily. Anything that requires any kind of computation or calculation can be connected with whatever you're studying. So those are just a few examples.
Yeah, Quentin is actually asking for some examples of interleaving in the chat. And yeah, I agree. You can do related subjects. You can also do like slightly unrelated subjects, and maybe you will find surprising connections. It's not guaranteed to work, but what you do find is if you get really, really deep into some subject, you will find that that those like core principles turn out to be the same for anything that you go really, really deep into. And I think Joss Waitzkin described this very well in the Art of Learning. So he was a nationally ranked chess player, and so he went really deep into learning chess and learned all the basic principles. But then he switched to push hands, which is martial arts, and became world champion in that as well. So he went really deep into two completely different areas, but he discovered that the foundational principles at the core of those disciplines were actually the same. So that's another way in which interleaving can work. Let's see if there's more questions in the chat. If anybody else wants to come on stage, by the way, that's also possible.
So Jackson's got a question. So learning something new can be intimidating at times. What techniques can one use to get familiar faster with a new topic or something which you don't have any clue about?
Yeah, so one thing I do, Jackson, is basically creating this tree of knowledge that I talked about, which is almost similar to the process of mind mapping. So you read maybe a couple of different sources about the topic you are learning about, and then you try to identify what's the common denominator between all of this, and what's really at the core, what's the core principle, and then how does that branch out into the different subjects, and kind of drawing this mind map for yourself, whether that's on paper or using some app, can help you learn a new intimidating topic and basically get you an overview and try to take away some of this overwhelm, some of this anxiety, feeling of being intimidated at first. Ryan, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is, one of the things that can get you to look at what you should really focus on when you're getting started with a new topic is talk to mentors and experts in that field, because they'll be able to point you to the relevant bits that you can get started with. So you won't waste time trying to like explore everything on your own. You'll get a path, and then from there you can sort of deviate and see what else you want to go into. So I think it's always valuable to speak to people who are ahead in your learning journey, because they can give you clues.
Yeah. Okay, Neha had a question before. To retain subjects or topics that you don't practice or use regularly. I think Neha was really useful there is the spaced repetition that I mentioned. So even if you don't practice something regularly, you can use those spaced repetition algorithms, so apps, to set those reminders for yourself, and you will basically be reminded at the exact moment you're about to forget something, and that basically kicks it back into your mind in an artificial way, even if you don't practice it regularly in your in real life. So that's something that can help there. What else do we have in the chat? Andrew is asking.
Sorry, I have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
So I have term learning in public. So like, how can we do that and embrace accountability from like social media or a community that we are part of?
Great question. Do you want to take that, Ryan?
Yeah, sure. I think that's awesome. That's something I have done in the past. And one of the great benefits of learning in public is that it gives you a chance to actually practice what you're learning. And one of the things that stops people from doing that is, oh, like, what if I'm wrong? What if, I'm not making sense? What if I haven't understood it properly? But if you can get over that initial hesitation, learning in public, especially writing or making videos or, tweeting threads about what you're learning, I think it's just such a powerful way of practicing what is called the Feynman technique, which is, where you teach while you're learning. And if you can do it consistently in public, I think that's like one of the best things you can do. I've done it in the past, especially when I was learning about crypto, and it was just amazing. The conversations you can have with people is just like, it's truly the best thing you can do to accelerate your learning.
Right.
Sorry, did that answer your question, Veer? Yeah, I totally recommend it. That's like one of the best things you can do for your learning.
Yeah, so there's one question in the chat from Andrew, actually about something which I did, which is he says it's pretty difficult to make a memory palace of the whole Chinese language. But actually, Andrew, that's kind of the technique I've been practicing, and it does take a lot of time. Well, it takes a lot of upfront work, but once you get going, it actually is a very powerful process. And I'm happy to talk to you into more detail. And if you're interested in learning Chinese, teach you how to do that as well. I'm just gonna drop my email in the chat so you can contact me there. I think we will also add our emails to the Notion templates that we send out so that you can contact us at any time. And you will also receive our newsletter if you download that Notion template, so that you can always get in touch. Any other interesting questions?
So Gwen's got a good question. So she says, what do you both think about just-in-time learning, and how does it connect with superlearning?
So I guess when we're talking about just-in-time learning, is that learning something just at the moment that you need to apply the skill?
Yeah.
I think that's actually quite good, because then you're forced to put it into practice directly. And I always say, if it's possible to learn something by doing, then that's always the best way. The thing is that a lot of things that we have to learn in our job, in our studies, because of long feedback loops, it's not possible to learn those by doing, or because the risks are high, right? If you have to learn some financial stuff, you can't just put $1 million of the company you're working for on the line. But if it's possible to learn by doing, then I would say that's always the most effective way. And just-in-time learning seems to me like a very great use case of that. Ryan, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting, like the research around spaced repetition, spaced retrieval, it roughly boils down to, so if you want to remember something for a day, you repeat it every few hours. If you want to remember something a month down the line, you repeat it every few days. And if you want to put something into your long-term memory to remember it many years down the line, you need to repeat it every few months. So that's sort of how how the time periods go in terms of how you actually repeat what you're learning. So I guess to answer your question, Gwen, it really depends on whether you want to be able to learn and apply that for the long term. If it is for the long term, you will have to repeat it multiple times over a few months to really remember it. But if it's something that you just need, for something that you're doing at a presentation, for example, and you don't really care whether you've learned it in the long run, then I think something like just-in-time learning can be really useful. And plus, as long as you're applying it, that's like a second sort of module of learning built into the process. So, yeah.
All right, what else do you say? Okay, Jackson is gonna try mind maps. I think that's a great idea, Jackson. How does the goal of your learning tie into selecting techniques? It's what Quentin is asking. I guess, Ryan, you answered part of that question in the case of just-in-time learning. And I think, in general, the techniques that we have mentioned are most useful if your goal is really lifelong learning, basically learning a skill which can help you for the rest of your life. Although if you have to study for an exam, for example, which is like a different goal, right? Techniques like spaced repetition and active recall can still help a lot. But obviously you'll need to adjust them a bit because yeah, there is like a hard deadline when you have to know everything, and after that it doesn't make sense to keep practicing, right? And any thoughts?
Yeah, I think like if you're just learning because you're genuinely curious about something, but you don't really like, it always helps to have a concrete goal for what you're learning, simply because emotions are a big part of learning, and when you have a concrete goal, you're a lot more emotionally invested, and therefore you're going to put a lot more effort into it. But so things like exams, things like, you know, learning a particular skill to get a job, learning a skill so you can bring out a product or a service that you can sell. All of those are really high motivation things, and they're usually associated with better learning outcomes. So I guess from a motivational standpoint, it always helps to have a goal that you're working towards, because you're going to be excited about it.
Let's see what other questions we have. Okay, Richard has been using our app. That's great. Eli, okay, he's recommending some tools as well.
Oh, there are questions in the Q&A tab. Ooh, we missed that.
Okay. Tina is also asking for details about the course. Okay, let's take the Q&A tab first.
Yeah, Folajimi's got a great question. How do you curate resources for learning a topic? Do you often create your own curriculum when learning a new topic?
Yeah, that's a great one. So yeah, what I usually do is try to identify the best sources either on Google or Twitter, right? Recommendations, and then I try to identify what's the key common themes around those sources, and then from that I try to build my own curriculum, my own tree of knowledge, as I described before, and then we'll just copy in content that I find interesting, and then start maybe asking questions about that, like what are the gaps, and which other resources can I look into to fill those gaps, to basically try to answer my own questions that I still have around the topic. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I probably do the same. The only thing that I try and do when I start out on a new topic is I try and look for, like, every topic and every subtopic for that matter usually has like the Bible, you know, like the go-to book if you want to learn about that. And I always try and start there. And then from there, you can start creating this tree and start branching out, and you get ideas for different resources that you can use. And the other thing I try and make sure that I do is try and use different media, right? So it's not only books. It's try and do a bit of videos, a bit of audio material, a bit of reading, so that you're getting like a nice mix, because that's usually how we tend to retain information best. So.
Right. Yeah, and then there's another question by Peter. How do you manage learning while working full time? And I think that's a great question, because most of us got very busy schedules, got busy jobs, and I guess that's really where our course and the techniques we teach come in as well, because they're all about kind of what some people call micro learning. So it basically means you create a learning habit which doesn't actively takes very little time. So maybe just 15 minutes in the evening, or maybe every time you go to the bathroom, like you can sit down and review some flashcards, for example, or you can think of some questions or take some notes about the topic that you're studying. And these are all little things that you can do throughout the day, which virtually don't take any time by themselves, but they add up over time and they can compound into a very powerful learning habit. Any other thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah. So Peter, incidentally, this was sort of the question that we set out to answer when we created the course. So as we spoke to more and more people, we realized that one of the fundamental problems that people have, especially people who are working and trying to learn at the same time, is just basically overwhelm, right? There's too much information, there's too much out there, and you're trying to learn as much as possible in the shortest amount of time possible. So the course is all about sort of how do you learn despite that overwhelm? How do you get over that? And how do you build a habit or a system that allows you to make progress despite all of these other things that are happening in your life? So it's all about creating a system that you can stick to. It doesn't matter if it's even just 10 minutes a day, but as long as it becomes a habit, over time, you'll see that the results really do compound. And so, yeah, great question. Thanks for asking that.
Oh yeah, Rashida is also mentioning the see one, do one, teach one, which is indeed a great technique for practical skills. And that's one thing we haven't mentioned in the presentation. We mentioned basically like seeing one, right, which is like the first step of learning, and then doing, which is applying those knowledge. But then another very powerful thing you can do is teaching one. Actually, this is also called the Feynman technique. Richard Feynman was a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, and he basically developed this concept of learning by teaching, and by teaching somebody who doesn't know anything about the subject, because that really forces you to explain it in your own words, in simple words. Like, you cannot hide behind any jargon, because, well, the other person doesn't know about the subject, right? So you're not going to understand. So you only truly understand something if you can teach it. So yeah, great mention there, Rachita.
So that ties in nicely into Veer's point as well about learning in public, because when you're sharing stuff, you're always going to attract people who are either interested in the same thing or learning the same thing, and then you can really have interesting conversations.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Veer made some great notes there. And yeah, Veer, if for anybody who wants to remember the stuff that we put out in the session, yeah, just go to the link that we sent. I'll send it again, because there you'll basically get access to a document which has all of those principles listed, and even a mini course and a habit builder as well. And I'll also copy my email address here again as well. And maybe, Ryan, you can do the same for people who want to get in touch.
Yeah, sure.
And yeah, if you do download that, you will also be added to our newsletter. So then we'll stay in touch anyway. Yeah. So Tina, about the course, we're in the process of creating it, obviously, but it's going to be a cohort-based course, probably of around 5 weeks, with a week break in the middle, because breaks are another essential part of learning. Taking breaks helps your unconscious process what you're learning. And yeah, in the cohort-based course, we will be doing core sessions. We will be doing accountability and support to actively help you learn what you want to learn. So at the beginning of the course, you will choose a specific skill or topic that you want to learn about. And we are in the course going to help you learn that skill. So it doesn't actually take up any additional time, because you are going to be learning the specific skill that you want to be learning. And in addition to that, we're also planning to do like a WhatsApp or text-based course, which makes it much easier to get you to do your learning habits, obviously, because we look at our phones all the time, right?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we're going to experiment with, which is try and roll out a course exclusively on WhatsApp. So the idea there is that we try and communicate every day, and every day you'll get a little bit of content, either through a video or a voice note or a bit of text or a visual, and we'll set you a task. So that keeps you accountable on a daily basis. It's only going to take 10 to 15 minutes a day, because that's what we want to try and get you to get you in a habit of doing. And you do that for 30 days, and at the end of 30 days, we can pretty much guarantee that you'll be a changed learner. You'll be a super learner.
All right. Okay, Nia is asking, can you throw some lights on grasping large data sets in crunch timelines and delivering quality solutions? That's an interesting one. So, I mean, for me, this sounds like basically where you have to learn a lot of data, data which might even be quite meaningless to you, which isn't, which is not easy to be curious about. That sounds to me like a good application for building something like a memory palace, so where you artificially encode this data and attach artificial meaning and an artificial story to it in order to remember it, which is, as I said, something I've done in the past to be able to learn Chinese characters, which initially also were to me just like a large data set of some squiggly lines without any meaning to them. And then through adding stories and visualizations, I was able to add meaning and remember those. So maybe that's something you can try there, Ryan. Any other ideas?
I think visual, like if you're actually talking about concrete data, like stuff that comes in a spreadsheet, I think the quickest way to grasp what's happening is to visualize it. So the first thing that you do when you have some data in front of you is just try and plot it. And then you'll get an idea of what you need to do next after you've plotted it. Yeah, that's what I would do with, like, if you were talking about actual data, that is.
All right. And yeah, Rashida is actually a doctor. So yeah, I know people studying medicine have to learn lots of stuff. So that's definitely definitely an area where super learning will be very beneficial.
Cool. I think that's about it. Thanks everyone for joining. It was awesome having you. I think we were a bit scared initially because we didn't know how interactive Hopin would be, but it's been really interactive through the chat. So thanks to everyone who stayed, and thanks to everyone who's been so active on the chat. It's been awesome.
Yeah, I think storyboarding isn't effective. And by the way, if you haven't downloaded the mini course, you can also put your email into the chat, and we'll add you to the newsletter as well if you're interested in that.
Yeah, we'll be doing lots of stuff in the months to come. So it'd be great to have you all to be a part of it. Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks Abder, Rachita, Quinton, Tamanna, Neha. Yeah, super session of super learning. Yay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, guys. All right. Yeah, we hope you have been able to take away something from this session and can put it into practice. And of course, we are giving you a habit builder on your way, which will help you put this into practice.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Enjoy the rest of the conference. There's some amazing speakers, lots of my friends, or our friends, I should say. So make sure you check out all the other sessions as well. And yeah, we'll see you around. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.